Okay, well, thank you. Thanks for the introduction. It was very nice. Never been introduced that well before, so very nice. I appreciate that. And thank you, Anu, for having us. And thanks everyone for being here and attending. We appreciate it. And we hope you get a lot out of this. So we had some intro slides, but we can probably maybe skip through those or go through those quickly. I don't know, anything you want to add to that, Andy? Or but it's hard to
No,
top the introduction we already got. So
yeah, no, I think we had a great introduction. This is my family, so everything was pretty much said already, but thanks for being here. I appreciate it. I'll go to you, Ben.
yeah, and this has already been covered. The only other things mentioned, yeah, I've got two awesome kids. There they are. They keep me really busy. Almost 5 and almost 2, so keeping my hands full. And I use Scrum at home a little bit. So, but anyways, we can move on past that. Great introductions again. So first off, we just kind of wanted to set some expectations about this session. And we found that when we do webinars, we have the best engagement and best sessions when we follow these rules here. So if you have a camera and you can use it, please do, because we'll be using breakout rooms, and it's just really nice to be able to see the people you're talking to, and that kind of helps build some bonds and kind of have that the feeling of forming a team when we go into some breakout rooms and having those discussions. So if you have a camera and you can use it, please do. Ask questions as we go. Don't hold the questions till the end. We want this to be engaging. If you have questions, we want you to get them out so we can answer them. We want to really have this be a discussion between everyone in the call. So we would appreciate, if you have a question, just bring it up. If you do have background noise, just please mute yourself. It's up to you. I kind of like not having people on mute, because then you can react and we can hear if you laugh or, make noises. But if you have something in the background, please mute. If you need to leave, just drop off. No need to, interrupt and say you're leaving, or maybe type something in the chat. We'll miss you if you leave. Please don't leave. But if you have to, just feel free to drop off. Be prepared to go into the breakout rooms. So we'll use Zoom breakout rooms and go maybe put you in groups of 3 or 4, something like that, so we can have more focused conversations. And then we might use Mural at the end if we have time. And so if we do use Mural, it's best to use that with Chrome and Firefox, or Chrome or Firefox. It doesn't like Internet Explorer. So that's kind of just some rules or some things to think about as we go through this session. So, okay.
All right, we're gonna get that activity going right away. We're gonna do a breakout room session. So Ben's gonna help us organize into breakouts, and we want you all to talk about and discuss some challenges that you've experienced while working with remote teams. So we're going to take about 5 minutes to talk with your group about that, and then we'll come back and debrief slightly on that.
Yep. So any questions before we go into the breakout rooms? You'll be there for about 5 minutes. You'll have the opportunity to leave a little bit early if you want to come back, but just go in the breakout room and just talk about the question here. Any questions? Okay, we'll send you there now for about 5 minutes. So we'll see you back here in a little bit.
We have been yanked back in. So
okay, great. So just confirm you can see my screen, making sure that that screen share is still working. All right, cool.
You've got 5 minutes. Checking that we have that.
Yes. All right. So we wanted a few people to chime in here. What were some of the challenges that we're experiencing with remote teams?
So for us, we talked about time zones. That's a huge one. We also talked about learning to be more succinct and not soaking up, so much time. So getting to the point more, and also paying attention to nonverbal feedback. Maybe people are showing signs of boredom that you're not picking up on because it's you're not there in person, or maybe someone wants to say something, contribute something, but they're not bold enough to cut in, as sometimes you might have to do in these type of meetings.
Yep, that's good stuff. Yeah, thank you for those. Anyone else?
We had delays in response to emails sometimes, as opposed to being able to just walk over to your colleague's desk and and get a quick chat or a quick response to something. Another one was in terms of interruptions, working from home. You get family walking in and asking questions, even though you've said specifically that you're working on a meeting.
Yes.
A third one was connectivity, losing connection during a meeting or a call and dropping out. And then finally, for one person in particular, she found that she was often working without realizing it, longer hours
Hmm.
in being remote.
Yep. Yeah, that's a common one. Just the balance is hard to keep track of when you're at home. So yeah, those are good ones. So looking at some of the data on this, here's a state of remote work. So this is a neat little report they put out each year, and they ask some questions about remote work. And this is one that we've been talking about in our breakout rooms here, that what's the biggest struggle? And we have some of the same type of things here, like collaboration and communication, just disruptions in service, and being able to really communicate like we would in person is hard. And then just loneliness and just not really feeling a part of a team or a group of people. And then just not able to unplug was mentioned, kind of always feeling like you're working, and then distractions as well. So some of the things that got mentioned were some of the top on this survey of data that was found. So just interesting here to find out the challenges, and we've all been faced with that here recently. So this is all probably near and dear to our hearts as we've had to do this remotely with the pandemic. All right, moving on to Ben.
Yeah, so here's so that was just a quick little check-in to get people talking and comfortable with the breakout rooms. So here's a quick overview of what we'll be talking about today for about the next about hour and 10 minutes. So we're talking about what is a team. We'll talk about team formation and team building. We'll talk about different ways to communicate effectively, tools to support remote teams, remote facilitation, and then just some general good remote practices. And then at the end, if we have more time, we'd be open to any questions you have and continue the discussion that way. But again, just a reminder, please, if you have questions as we're going through this or comments, just please interject and keep the discussion going. So Andy and I don't want this to just be us talking to people. We want to everyone to engage. So that's the overview. And to start off here, we're going to do another little activity. So we're going to send you to breakout rooms for 3 minutes, and we'll try to keep you in the same rooms, but if people come in and out, sometimes the breakout rooms get a little bit mixed up. But what we'd like you to do is talk about this. What is a team? Because we often find that we just put a group of people together and there's an expectation that this is a team and you're on a team now. So we want you to talk about what is a team. So in your breakout rooms, I'll give you 3 minutes and think about this scenario. So there's a scenario where 100 passengers board an airplane for a flight, and then 4 flight attendants, so the cabin crew, which is 4 flight attendants, also board the flight. So what we'd like you to talk about is which of those either the 100 passengers or the cabin crew is a team, and which one is a group, and why. Okay, any questions about that before I send you there for 3 minutes? Okay, so we've got 100 passengers and 4 flight attendants. Which is a team and which is a group, and why? So we'll send you to a room for 3 minutes, then we'll come back and talk about it.
Again,
In this scenario.
The 4 crew members are definitely a team. They have a common purpose, which is to help the passengers. So that's their purpose, to help the passengers have a beautiful experience traveling. And the people in the plane, they are just a group of people traveling.
Yep, absolutely. That's right. Any other thoughts about that, or any other reasons for why? Which is a team, which is a group? But that is correct.
We sort of agreed along the same lines, but I think one thing that we agreed on was that circumstances or prevailing events during the flight might lead to the passengers and the crew members becoming a team. For instance, if there's a hijack, they all come together to stop the hijackers or the hijacker.
Yeah, that's a great point. I didn't think about that. So yeah, that could be chaotic, but that could give them a common purpose. That's a very good point. So yeah, these are both great reasons. Andy, you can reveal I have some context here, and like I mentioned, oftentimes we just kind of group people together and say, now you're a team, start working effectively. But there's a lot that goes into being a team, and we oftentimes don't take the time to think about that. So as we just heard, a team is a group of people who share a common purpose and a goal. A team is committed to the purpose, the goal, and each other. So the 4 flight attendants, like we heard, their goal is to provide a beautiful experience for the people on the plane, and that's their goals. They're committed to each other, and they need to help each other out and understand that goal and the purpose. A team is accountable to each other. They share an identity, so they're the flight attendants for that particular airline, and it's not just a collection of independent individuals, and that's what the passengers would be, unless maybe there's a hijacking or something like that. But in most situations, the passengers would just be a group of people that are they're doing their own thing. It doesn't really matter to maybe for me, I'm flying to Chicago. It doesn't matter to me if people are landing and connecting to go somewhere else, because I'm doing my own thing. So we just want to reinforce that having a team is important, and understanding what a team is very important. You can't just group people together and say, go be a high performing team, whether it's in person or remote. There's some work that goes into that. So that's what we want to get across here. Any thoughts or questions about that? If not, we can move on here to the next one, team formation. I think that's Andy.
All right. So yeah, before we come together and form as a team, when we think about organizing new teams, if you're in a situation where you have influence or a way to weigh in here, we obviously want to set our teams up to be successful to begin with. So when we think about that, we want a dedicated team. We want people that are going to be dedicated to each other fully. So 100% dedicated, so one and only team. So in addition to being dedicated, we also want it to be successful with cross-functional. So having all the skills that are going to be able for us to be successful together. So not that every team member has to have all the skills, but collectively as a group, we possess all the skills to be successful with the work that we're doing. And then co-located whenever possible. So even in remote situations where we may have some remote team members, we want to co-locate when we can, right? So if we can get 2 or 3 team members together and co-locate in person, that's better than none. So obviously we want to do that whenever possible. And then limiting time zones. So usually with time zones, 1 or 2 hours is not a big deal. But when we're halfway around the world and we only have a 1 or 2 hour overlap with team members, that's not ideal. So we want to try to avoid that up front and organize our teams in a way that they're going to be successful. So then getting into forming, one thing that we find when we go to organizations and start coaching is a lot of teams are just thrown together very quickly and they just dive right into the work. And what we find is often they don't actually take the time to get to know each other very well on a personal level. So we want to make time for this. And when we do coaching, we have a two-week liftoff period that we are intentional about making sure that the team gets to know each other well. So in addition to training, we do lots of team building and get to know you exercises to be able to help forge those connections. So make time for that. And then if it's possible, bring the team members together in person during the liftoff. So even if it's a remote team scattered all over, if it's possible to bring everybody in during that liftoff period, that 1 or 2 week time where you can solidify everybody as a group, we found that to be very, very helpful. So recommend that. And then just piggybacking from Ben on what is a team, thinking about our vision, the book Start With Why, Simon Sinek is good about talking about really let's ask the bigger question, like, why are we here? What's our purpose? What are we doing here? So, start with those questions. What is our purpose? What is this team a part of? Are we a part of something bigger? What are we doing together that's going to help the greater good, the greater purpose? And then thinking about forming working agreements with your team. So this is a very important thing to do to make sure that your team members are on the same page. And we have a link here, and just a reminder too, that we'll be sharing all these slides with you, as well as the last page, or second to the last page is a references, which has some references to links like this. So I just wanted to mention that. But this right here is showing you a guide to creating working agreements. And us coaches at Project Brilliant put this together to help teams organize the working agreement, to just kind of a step-by-step way of forming a working agreement. And basically, again, just getting everybody on the same page, making sure that people have a clear understanding of what it means to work together and what's important to the group when working together. So looking at this, we actually have our own working agreement on it. So this is the Project Brilliant working agreement. So trying to be transparent here. But yeah, so, be on time, do what you say you're going to do, intentionally share learning, challenge each other. So these things are important to us, and that's why it's in our working agreement. So this is just an example of one, and it's actually ours. And then getting down a little further is a template for you. So we like to frame it like we work best as a team when, and then we have it categorized here where you have 4 different categories. So things like behavior would be, how are you want to treat each other? How are you going to work together? How are we going to act? And then technology would be more of tools based, like what tools we're going to use? How are we going to communicate that way? And logistics might be more of your meeting times, your working hour, your core working hours, things like that. And as well as fun, to make sure that we're intentional about having fun together. So these are some good reference for you to be able to create working agreements. So yeah, so any questions about working agreements? All right.
Okay, so Andy talked about the importance of team building and getting to know people on your team. And there are a lot of different ways to do that. But one thing I'd like to reference is this study called Project Aristotle by Google. Has anybody heard of that? Project Aristotle? Anu has.
Yes, I have.
Florence, okay. Yep, so there is just for other people that aren't aware of it, Google did a study, I think it was a couple of years ago, and they looked at their highest performing teams at Google, and they did a study to figure out what made those teams tick and what were the most important characteristics of those teams. And it was found that the most important characteristic of a high performing team is psychological safety. So psychological safety meaning, it's okay to make mistakes. We feel free to ask questions. We can trust the people on our teams. So, having that psychological safety and feeling comfortable with the people that you're around, that was the most important thing to high performing teams, most important characteristic. So it wasn't about, individual skills that people had or the tools and technologies they're using or, whether or not they have ping pong tables or whatever. It was about that psychological safety. So it's often, again, something that we see overlooked is we don't get to know the people on our teams. We just, view them as coworkers. But when we start to understand them as people outside of work, they have families, they have hobbies, they have challenges, and getting to know each other, it brings the team closer together. And then you're more comfortable supporting someone in your team or having their back or, putting in some extra time maybe to help out if they, have something going on with their family. So just the team building is very, very important, and it oftentimes gets overlooked. So a couple of ways to do that. One thing that we have done at Project Brilliant is the DISC profile. So it's kind of the personality test to get your personality style. And we did that because we have, different kinds of people on our team. So we found it was really important to understand, what is that person like? What are their, how do they communicate? What is their style? Things like that. And then you can understand, based on that, then how I can change the way I behave or act with them, or maybe I'll, ask them questions differently than I might ask someone else. So really getting to know people is important, and a DISC profile is one way to do that. And then there are a lot of team building activities too. And again, these oftentimes get overlooked. People sometimes just say, we just want to work. We don't want to do any of that other stuff, but it's really important. And there's a study, I think the study was on teambonding.com, that says about 65% have never done team building activities. So what about here on this call? Have people done team building activities? Is that something that's pretty common for people on the call?
Yeah, a lot of team building, lunches, happy hour.
Okay, so Lola's got some happy hours and team building. Anybody else?
We played Two Truths and a Lie.
Okay, yeah, that's fun.
Retro coffee.
Retro coffee. Okay, very good. Yeah, we've done Two Truths and a Lie at Project Brilliant, and we found out some really, really interesting things about people. So anyways, a couple I'd like to show you here. I have some screenshots from a blog post I read a while ago, are personal maps and journey lines. So Andy, if you wouldn't mind showing those. So personal maps, this is something that Jürgen Appello, the guy who has Management 3.0, he came up with. And this is one I just created for a fictional character, Forrest Gump, if you've ever read that book or seen that movie. So you essentially just start in the middle with yourself, and then you branch off to things like your interests or your career, your education, family, friends. You can put whatever in there, things like values, it doesn't matter. But you just walk through and you tell the story about yourself. So this is, personal map. These are the things that are important to me. These are the things that motivate me. This is called a personal map.
Personal map. All right.
Yeah, and when we go back to the slide, you'll see it there. But yeah, it's a personal map. So you can just walk people through and let them know that these are the things that are important to me. And I've been with many teams who have shared these, and people get emotional. Maybe they say, my mother passed away from cancer, or sometimes they can get emotional. So you really start to build those bonds and connections. And then the next one I'd like to show here is called Journey Lines. This was my journey line I created a couple of years ago, and this is more career-based. So you kind of show on a timeline of your career, and you just plot out, different roles you had or different important moments in your career. And then, you talk about if it was, my career is trending up, and, for me, you can see here the red lines, like there are a couple of times when things went downhill and I was unhappy. But you just kind of walk your coworkers or your team members through your journey line of your career, and it gives them some background maybe on your experience or, what skills you have. And again, like for me, around 2013, there's a lot of job stress. So, I can talk about that and how I, recovered from that. So again, it's just another way to get to know each other at a more personal level, instead of, you're just the person who sits next to me. Now I know part of your story and what makes you tick as a human. So that's journey lines. Yeah, feel free to go back, Andy. Thanks. So those are personal maps and journey lines. We heard a couple people say, things like the virtual happy hours, Two Truths and a Lie. That's a lot of fun. The bucket list challenge, which we're actually going to do here in a minute. Andy will lead us through this little exercise. Then we have a couple of websites there where you can find some good team building activities. So again, just making sure you form that team and you get to know each other so you can become that high performing team that we probably all want to be on. So any questions about team building or any of the other stuff that we've kind of built up here with the team formation, or what is a team? If not, that's okay.
All right, so time to do another breakout room activity. So what we're going to look at here is personal bucket list. So something you want to do before you kick the bucket and pass away. So you want to talk with your group on some things that you want to accomplish before you die. So we're going to pop you back into breakout rooms for 5 minutes to talk with your group about that.
And sending you there right now. So have a focus on audio and video quality. If you can, if you have headphones, use the headphones because that can really block out some of the noise. We're all working at home, or most of us are working at home now, and we've got kids, we've got animals, maybe we've got people doing some work at our house, whatever. It can get loud. So try to find a place that's quiet. Use headphones if you can. Have a good quality video camera if you can. Those things really help out. And then choose the strongest form of communication available. So we recommend, or with Project Brilliant, we use Slack a lot of the time. So we use Slack and Zoom, but just, figure out what works for the team and what's going to be, again, what's going to mirror or mimic as closely as you can being in person. So, maybe having a phone call instead of sending an email, something like that. Also, we found that when working remotely, over-communicate. It's easy to, for things to drop through the cracks. So just over-communicate. Maybe send the message a couple of times, or maybe in different mediums. And again, this is something to figure out with your teams, because you don't want to be annoying and sending the same message all the time. But we found that over-communicating helps because there's just a lot of distractions at home, and when we're not sitting right next to each other, it's also harder to make things visible on whiteboards and flip charts in the office. So the over-communication is really helpful too. And then leverage tools that work. And Andy's going to start talking about tools a little bit more here. But communication is so important anytime, but especially when we're remote. We want to make sure that people are hearing the messages we're saying, and we can see people nodding, or if they're about ready to jump into a conversation. So we just want to, again, mirror communication as much as we can, so that it's like the communication we have in person. Questions or thoughts? Anything to share about communication from your point of view, from anybody?
Yeah, I guess like my only, thought is, I know the context of this is really kind of talking about like remote teams, but I think we all know and hopefully agree that this equally applies to just like physical communication as well. I think oftentimes there's this perception or assumption that like we don't have to do a lot of these very basic things in terms of like, build, connections, have meaningful relationships. And so I think everything that we're talking about probably is required more in a physical environment than even in a virtual environment, versus attempting to index on these things once you go in virtual. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's right. To me, the communication is paramount. There are a few things more important than that when you're trying to work as a team or get things done, or just be on the same page with people. So yeah, you're right. Whether it's physical or remote, it's very important.
My organization is pretty much teleworking now, and we have different phases where we will go back to work, and there will be and people who aren't comfortable are fully allowed not to come back. And I'm foreseeing that some people, if part of the team is in the office and part of the team is virtual, and you just start to have a conversation that is substantive, and the other team or the people aren't hearing this, and they would be hearing it if they were all together. It's like skills that we're not really super used to using. Do you have any recommendations for how to do that? And actually, I'm working on an effort to have etiquette and cultural cues and advice for doing this type of work. So that's one reason I'm excited about being here. So.
Mm-hmm. So, and thank you. So are you asking what's a good way to help make sure that everyone receives the same message?
Yes. And sometimes a lot of communication is just very ad hoc, casual. Just, oh, did you hear this about this project that, we can't do this anymore and we're going to have to do that. So. Sure.
Yep. That's a good question. And I'll add my 2 cents, but if anyone else has any ideas, I would say, again, over communicate. So maybe, send the message through multiple channels, things like Slack, where you can have team channels. or Teams. The client I'm working with right now uses Microsoft Teams. So having a place where everyone on the team, or maybe in that division or department, everyone can come here to this one place to receive the message. I think that's important. And then, if you're manager or someone, in a position like that, having town halls with everyone could be good. Or if you're on a scrum team, the daily scrum, maybe you adapt a little bit to, we're going to share some messages that everyone needs to hear on the team, because this is our daily touch point. So I think just finding, consistent and recurring places to share messages, and then just making sure that the team agrees that this is a good place to hear the message, whether it's on a call on Zoom or through a Slack channel, something like that. That's what comes to mind, but any thoughts from anyone else?
I have a question. All right, so this is a training where so many people are coming from different, many people are at work right now, so cameras are off because of that. But when you're dealing with like an office meeting and everybody's supposed to, they've been given notice that there's going to be a meeting and all that, how do you encourage people to put on their cameras? Because I noticed when you have 2-3 people turn off their cameras, everybody else just turns, so, but if everybody can get into the habit of having it on when it's an official meeting, it makes it easier. So how do you encourage people to do that?
So for me, like when I go in and start working with teams, I usually am kind of, I wouldn't say strict or forceful, but I strongly encourage that we all use our cameras, because again, we want to make it as close to in person as we can. And then it comes to the working agreements, I think. So, each team will create working agreements, and it should be in those working agreements that we agree that we are all going to use our cameras at all times. Or, I've been on teams where they say we're not going to do it in the sprint review because we have a lot of stakeholders joining and there's a lot of bandwidth being used. But if it's just a team meeting, have it in the working agreements and have everyone agree to that. And, sometimes there will be people that don't want to, and we can talk through what are the issues, why don't you want to do that? But to me, that's a good place to start, is just the working agreements. And also I'd say management or, executives setting the example too. So when they have meetings and calls with people, they do that and they set the example that they want other people to follow.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, to add to what you just said, because I teach, I lecture a class in business, and it's really hard to get people to turn on their videos. But just like you said, I try to make it. I give them an example, but I try to let them see how it'll be of benefit to everyone. You see my face, I see my face. We're trying to make it as real as possible. Mm-hmm. And I tell my students that if you're coming to class, you don't come with your class you don't come to class with your face covered.
Right.
So it's the same thing. We're in class or we're in a team meeting. So let's open up our face and let's communicate better. I get to know you more.
Yeah.
If you just share the benefits, then they're able to relate to it, to what you mean.
Yeah.
Some don't open up to. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'll say some don't actually take it, but most people do. And when they see most people open up their videos, they feel more relaxed, to do the same thing.
Yeah, and so thank you for that. And adding on a little bit to that, I've seen some teams that I've worked with recently, they try to make it fun also. So some teams maybe will switch what they do each day. So maybe today is hat day and everyone's going to wear a hat, like a fun hat or a silly hat or something. Mm-hmm. So, it's a reason to put on the camera, or everyone's going to have a competition to see who can have the best background. In Zoom, you can change the background like Anu has. So maybe one day it's who has the best background. So trying to make it fun and give people a reason to do that. But then, another reason, like someone mentioned earlier, like the bag over your head. Some people, I hear excuses are, well, if I have the camera on, I haven't put on my makeup today, or I haven't showered, or I haven't combed my hair, or whatever. And then the question can be, why haven't you done those things? You still have a job, you're still going to work. Just because we're working remotely doesn't mean you're not going to work. So I think usually when you talk through some of these reasons why people don't want to do it, usually realize aren't very good reasons usually. But sorry, someone was going to say something.
Yeah, also you could also add, let everybody bring their drink of choice, have a virtual drink, coffee, tea, whatever it is. Let's see what your drink of choice is. Make it fun. That way people just want to play the game, and you just keep it that way. So it's always good too. Yeah,
that's a good idea.
The board sometimes helps. Yeah.
What's your drink of choice there, Godwin? I've got water.
I got coffee.
Okay.
Sometimes I mix stuff.
I got water here too.
Very good. Yeah, thank you for those questions, that input. Anything else before I move on? I think Andy's going to start talking about tools here. But if anyone else has anything to add, please do.
Can I add that I like your background? It's beautiful.
Mine?
Yep, your background.
Thank you. Yeah, we use a lot of graphic facilitation in training classes and coaching. So I'm practicing, trying to get better. But thank you, I appreciate that.
I was going to say that I found it interesting when I look at the slide that you have on the screen now that says in maximize communication, and even says over communicate. While one of the first things that I heard in the breakout room was how some people dominate the conversation and all of that. So it's interesting always just finding that balance between, say, over communicating while at the same time, getting everyone engaged and involved without overdoing it.
Yeah, that can be a big challenge. I mean, in person or not. From my experience, it seems like people who are maybe introverts or more quiet tend to be even more quiet on video calls. So I think that's where having a good facilitator to help draw out some of the people that might be more quiet, or help the people who tend to dominate the conversation share the space. And again, maybe this could tie back to the working agreements, or maybe it's just facilitator trying to draw people out or share space. So that's a very good point. Do other people have any thoughts about that, or how to handle situations like that? And if not, that's okay. But that's a very good point. So thank you for bringing that up.
I think for people who do not talk, like during retros, especially now that we're all remote, sometimes I try to put people on the spot, and I'll just call names, and I'll be like, do you have something to say? Sometimes ask a general question, because just like we had a discussion earlier about challenges of remote. Find out that somebody might be there, you don't even know if they've checked out, you don't know if they're doing something else. There's going to be like a 2-minute silence where nobody's speaking. So this is the time for you now to like nudge people out, nudge people, call names. If you're not calling them out to say stuff, you're just asking them if they have any input, if they have a divergent,
right.
anything they want to say, because if you leave it that way and you're facilitating, it's going to be like that. Because sometimes when people are remote, just like we've been noticing, they don't really want to talk because you're not looking at their faces to know what they're doing. So you just have to try and nudge people, or just use some other ideas to make them talk.
Yep, that's a good point. I mentioned that in a call recently with some people where if I can't see you on the camera and you're not talking really ever, it's kind of almost like you're not there. I mean, you could be listening and getting information, but we really want to get people, involved in the conversation and engaged in being part of, whatever we're talking about. So that's a great point.
I think in all this, one of the things we should note is that the more elaborate means of communication, the less we communicate. In the sense that you have so many means and all that you find out nobody is really saying anything. So we just have to work in agreement, stick to a channel or whatever, so that you communicate better.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you're saying to keep it simple, right? Not too many different things going on at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. That's a great point too. Because there's so many tools out there, and we're going to be talking about some of the tools. But yeah, you're right. Find the minimal amounts you need, I guess, to be effective. That's a great point. Okay, Andy, maybe you want to get into the tools here?
Yeah. So thinking about some different categories of tools, we have collaboration tools can be very helpful. These are like whiteboard type of tools that you can expose and people can interact with real time, like Mural or Miro and Google Jamboard. And actually, I was going to show you an example. We recently had did a team liftoff, and this is just an example of a mural board that you can use to interact with a team or a group of people. So, different things you can do on here. You can attach files, so pictures. You can get retro layouts and some different grids and layouts that you can use to work with, as well as bringing in pictures and symbols. So various things you can do and just pull in to your board. So pretty cool tools here. This is just an example. I'll zoom in a little bit of a team liftoff we did. So we are all remote, of course, and just work through the same things we do in person, right? Definition of ready and done, figuring out our working agreements, and then organizing kind of a task list of what we need to do for the liftoff. So just different things like this that you can build. Retrospectives. Here's an example of a retrospective. So great way to interact online, virtually, real time with your team. So just wanted to give an example of that. So Mural is one that we as Project Brilliant team have been utilizing lately, but there's several like the Miro and Jamboard is some others. Anybody else use any whiteboarding or good collaboration tools?
This is actually my first time of hearing Google Jamboard.
Okay. Yeah, it's very similar to Mural or Miro if you're familiar with those, but it's essentially just the same thing that I kind of showed you. Very similar, just a whiteboarding tool. We find that it's really good for trainings or just to interact remotely with your team.
Andy, are these tools free?
Google Jamboard's free. Mural is free to a certain capacity, and then depending on how much you want to use it, there's some license.
Sure.
Yeah.
Usually is.
Yeah, exactly. But a lot of their base offerings is, I think Miro has a cost, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Miro has a cost.
So it's
go ahead, Anu.
30 days trial and you pay for it.
Okay.
Or you might be lucky to reach out to them to be one of their consultants and you can get it for free because I'm not paying for it.
Nice. A new work in the deals again.
She's a deal maker.
That's right. So yeah.
But the Jamboard is good anyway. It is free and it is good, and I use the Jamboard a lot.
Very cool.
Okay. That's good then to know.
I'm gonna get that. So in the Jamboard, could people work on it simultaneously? Like, okay, let's be quiet for the next 3 minutes and throw out some, what worked well last sprint, or what can we improve on? Could people work on that simultaneously and then without other people seeing what you're doing? Is it anonymous? Because you know how it is. Somebody goes up to the whiteboard in the room and they see, oh, so and so put great teamwork this last sprint. Then somebody else goes up there because they want to make sure they put something up there. Then they put up the same thing the person before them did. So
yeah. So definitely they can interact real time like that. You can, it usually shows that somebody's moving the cursor and you can tell that things are moving, but I believe you can change names. So or just keep it anonymous. Like you can just use animals or whatever. So I believe there is ways to do that so you can have confidentiality with it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Then there's an online platform, Slido.com. You can use it to do word cloud. You can use it to get some polls, and so people real time, or even they can ask questions that the facilitator can then answer. You can ask anonymously, or they can put their names.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, polls are nice too. So, and these tools do have, some of them have polls in them. That's pretty neat as well.
Oh, slide.com.
Slido. Anu, Slido.
Slido.
All right. Well, so that's some information about collaboration tools, and then just getting into some communication tools. Ben mentioned we use Slack a lot, and I've been with several teams that have used Teams as well, and Skype. So all these are good, and I think the main thing is that with a working agreement, you're on the same page as to what communication tool that you're going to use and what makes sense. And I think we mentioned it earlier, but is a good point. I would bring it up again, that sometimes we rely on the tools too much for everything. And in some cases, if you have a thread that goes on forever, let's just hop on a video call and solve this in 2 minutes. So I think it's appropriate to talk about, like, when you're going to use certain tools, and then if it becomes ineffective, then change it and figure out a way to make it effective. So then we have work management tools. This would be more in the scope of your work, whether you're doing Kanban or Scrum or something, some sort of work management system where you want to move work across some workflow. So Trello, Jira, Rally, all these are examples of tools that TFS, all those things are good tools. They all have, I would say, strengths and weaknesses with them. And a lot of it just depends on our organizations and what they use. But yeah, these are a few work management tools that work well for organizing your work. And then lastly, retrospective tools. We saw on the Miro board that you could do retros there too, but these are some others that actually have tools that sites that you can go to and reference. So Fun Retro, this is what you're seeing on the screen here. And it's customizable, so you can actually change the format and maybe how many columns you want to add. So you can, depending on how you want to do your retrospectives, you can change and modify it how you want to. And then Idea Boards is a good one. And then Lean Coffee Table is another great retrospective tool. So these are just some good tools. Anyone else have any good retrospective tools that they want to share?
There's one called Parabol, Parabol. I'll put it in the chat. That's pretty reasonable. It's free for two teams, I think.
Cool. I've not heard of that one. Thank you for sharing that.
Retrum is very good as well.
Yeah, Retrum.
I know. Is it Retrum or Retrial?
Retrum.
Retrum.
Retrum. Okay.
Yeah. The link is on the chat.
All right. And the other one was Tara Ball. T-A-R-A. Did you get that?
It's a P. P as in Paul. It's
P as in Paul.
It's in the chat box.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right. So yeah, so that's some of the tools that we wanted to mention, and there's so many out there, but it's a good place to collaborate on what tools work well. So this is good. Thank you for the feedback.
And I will talk here a little bit about remote facilitation. And in my opinion, it's pretty similar to in-person facilitation. Again, we want to try to make the remote experience as close to the in-person experience as we can. But these are some steps I like to take with remote facilitation. So co-creating the agenda and asking what's missing. So if we're having a meeting, one way to get people involved is to ask them what they think should be on the agenda to get people speaking and feel like they're part of the meeting. So, maybe it's your meeting and you have some ideas and you maybe write them, put them in Mural or something like that, but then ask other people, what is missing from the agenda? What else should we talk about? Gets people involved and engaged and makes them feel like they're part of it. Again, engaging everyone. So use check-ins. Like we used the check-in earlier today about what challenges you face with remote teams. The other simple ones are, just go around the room and in 3 words or less summarize, the last sprint or something like that. Just trying to get people to say something, because the longer you go in a meeting without saying something, the more likely it is that you're not going to say something for the rest of the meeting. So just a quick check-in where everyone just says something can really help. And we talked about this one when someone asked the question, but trying to draw introverts into the conversation and help extroverts share the space. So we're trying to get that balance so everyone feels like their voice is being heard, and we don't have one or two people dominating the conversation. So try your best to engage everyone. And that could even be using breakout rooms like we're doing here. So if there's 50 people on a call, it's probably less likely that everyone's going to speak up. But if we put you into rooms where you have 3 or 4 people, it's more likely that people will get engaged. We find it's really helpful to use time boxes all the time, but even remote. It seems like people just need to get up and stretch their legs a little bit more. So one thing we do is for every 60 minutes, we do 50 minutes working and then a 10-minute break. Or if you need to get a little bit more work in, one thing we've done is extend that to 90 minutes. So 80 minutes working and a 10-minute break. But something like that, we're using time boxes, and then you get on a consistent cadence of, we're going to work really hard and focus, then we'll take a break. Work really hard and focus, take a break. So the time boxes can be helpful for a lot of things. And then making next steps clear. So it's typically very frustrating when you go into meetings and then you leave the meeting and you ask, like, what just happened? I don't even know what happened. I don't know what the next steps are. I don't know who's supposed to do what. Are you supposed to do something? Am I supposed to do something? So just make it very clear when you're leaving the room. And as a facilitator, you could write that down on a whiteboard or a mural, or post it in the chat. These are the actions. These are the takeaways from the meeting. These are the people that are going to work on them. And then also clarify, when are we meeting next to talk about this? It seems like oftentimes at the end of meetings, we rush to get to the end, and then we leave without any clear understanding of what do we do next. So as a facilitator, that's something you can help kind of tie a bow on the meeting and make sure that it ends well and people understand what's next.
So I have a question. This is Lola.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so, because it's been since March remote, and how do you get the team to stay motivated? Because I know you have the 50-10 or 90 or 80-10, and sometimes it's just hard to stay motivated because you're in your office and in the home, you're like in a small box, and so I don't know, just how do you keep the team motivated?
I'd love to hear what other people think. From my point of view, I would want to ask the team what motivates them. I don't want to assume I know what motivates them. So if it seems like a team is unmotivated, or maybe it comes up in the retrospective that they're unmotivated or whatever, I would ask them, maybe individually, maybe as a team, like, what can we do to motivate you? Maybe it's having more happy hours or team buildings, or maybe it's, I don't know, changing the schedule. Like maybe we can talk to management and do 4 days working and take, work a little bit extra on 4 days and have an extra day off or something. So that's a tough question because I think it would depend on teams, but I would start by asking people on the team. But does anyone else have thoughts about that? It's a very good question, by the way. That's a tricky question.
Yeah, that is a good question, because that's one of the things, some studies that I've read with telework is that the productivity is very high when you start doing it, but as time goes on, it gets less, people are less productive. And also keeping the culture of the organization together is tough. And that's something that, I think you're going down that track with a lot of the things that you mentioned here, like the coffee hours and things like that. But a lot of supervisors and managers are not aware that this happens, and even I'm sure people in leadership positions are getting less motivated. So yeah, so it's something to being aware of. It is like half the battle. So.
Any other thoughts from anyone about that question? And I couldn't see who asked it, but the person who asked it, do you have any ideas or anything you've tried?
It was Lola that asked. Well, nothing really, because for me it's traveling and I can't travel, so that's how I stayed motivated. But since we can't do that now, it's kind of hard. I don't drink coffee, so, and I can't take a walk until after work. And like for me, we had to reduce our hours. So it's like taking a day off. We're already doing that. So
Yeah. So I don't know, like just coming up with ideas, but if you like to travel and that's something people are passionate about, and you can't travel, maybe it's taking time as a team to share pictures from the last time, like last vacation you took or something. Maybe everyone shares pictures from their travel, and maybe that could maybe make you feel like you've traveled. I don't know. It's a tough one though, but I'd say ask the team what would motivate them, and that's a good place to start.
cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So we've got about 10 minutes left. So maybe I should keep going, Andy.
Yep. So just looking at some good remote practices. So, with Scrum, we have the daily Scrum, but also just doing frequent check-ins. So just making sure that there's time throughout your day to have interactivity with your teammates. I know, speaking from experience with my team, when we did that, I felt way more motivated to actually do more work or just be inspired by others that I work with. And it just motivated me when I had connection with my teammates. So frequent check-ins definitely are important. Obviously, we want to inspect and adapt as we go and learn as we go, and then be accountable to each other as well. And then just making sure that you have ways to keep things visible and transparent. So, people are on the same page, whether that's, your working agreement or just you're visualizing your work, making sure that things are visible. People have a clear understanding of what they're doing and what someone else is doing, and just make sure that we're on the same page as we work. And then, of course, if you are in a team situation, shared calendars, sharing impediments, like visualizing that, having it in a place where you can see. So if it's in a remote setting, you may have a team site or a place in Teams or some sort of tool that and see all your team things, whether that's your calendar, impediments, maybe continuous improvement type items that you want to make sure everybody is visible. It's visible to everybody. So just ways to make sure that things are visible and transparent to your team. And then working together to get things done. So the things that we would, encourage when you're working together in one room, like with swarming and pairing and things like that, you can still do that in remote setting, right? There's tools, lots of tools we just shared, and then others specifically to pairing. And when you get into more software development, there's tools that actually can help them when doing pairing or swarming to be able to work together to get the work done. And then, of course, experiment. If something's not working in this era of everybody being remote, try things. And if it's not working, if it's not motivating your team, then what can we try to motivate us so that we have more motivation when we're doing our sprints or whatever work we're doing. So experiment and try new things. Questions on this? Good remote practices?
I put a question in the chat box.
Oh, sure. Let's see.
It says, please explain what swarming is, Andy.
Okay, so swarming is when in a team situation, that would be everybody's working to get typically the higher priority items done. So instead of us siloed and working on separate things and different initiatives, we would all then work together on that same item to be able to get it done quicker as a team and work together to get it done. So the issue of from a prioritization perspective, working on the highest priority things and working on it, focusing on it together as a team, and then getting it done and then moving on to the next item instead of siloed working where we're all separated out doing our own thing.
What does pairing mean?
Pairing would mean when you're buddying up with one person and you have one person in a software development perspective, you have one person coding with the other person's giving feedback and kind of directing and driving. So it's a good knowledge transfer type of opportunity where you could have the lesser experienced person driving and the person more of your expert type of role be able to help teach while they're pointing and where to go and some tips on how they're supposed to code a certain item. So that's what pairing is.
And the concept of synchronous and asynchronous communication, I think having an agreement on that as well can help reduce the fatigue of being online as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just having that on a working agreement, just making sure that everybody's on the same page with how we're going to communicate, how we're going to work together, how we're going to approach the sprint or whatever work that we're doing. Good comments.
Sorry, Andy.
Yes.
So from your explanation of swarming, you're talking about working on the topmost priority. Is that what you said? So because I understand swarming to be, for example, a sprint is coming to an end, and we're trying to ensure we finish up all of our stories before the sprint ends. Is that the same thing too?
Yeah, and it doesn't have. Yeah, it's more about working together to get it done, like putting more hands on it and to working together to get it done versus like whether it's the beginning or end of the sprint, it's kind of the same thing. Instead of working on things separately, we're coming together and swarming on something to get that item done.
Yeah, just like the word in it, swarming of bees, just all coming together to deal with that particular thing. Everybody putting their hands on deck and making it work.
Yeah.
I'm curious about shared accountability because how would you communicate? I mean, I guess you're trying to say that there won't be blaming. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure that it's everybody's response.
Yeah, so good question. So I would, in a team situation, whether we're doing, Scrum or whether we just have the same goals, if we're thinking about it as a team that we're dedicated to each other and we have a shared accountability to succeed as a team or fail. So we need to work together. So instead of it being individual accountabilities where we divide and conquer, we have a shared accountability where we're a team, we're working together to be able to be successful together. So we want to think of that way for our teams.
It looks like we just have about 3 minutes left. I want to be respectful of people's time. So I guess with these last 3 minutes, would anyone like to share any questions, any last thoughts, or maybe anything that you've learned that you can take away? And then I would just like to add, feel free to drop off in a couple of minutes, but if people do want to stick around and talk, I'm happy to stay on, and if other people want to, that would be fun. So we've got 2 minutes left. So anything to share, anything you've learned, any last questions?